So welcome to Design and Diaspora, a VNE Dundee series. I'm just going to developed in partnership with We Are Here Scotland and New Architectural Writers. The series explores the work of contemporary designers and creatives from diaspora communities across Scotland. And I'm just going to add our participants. So my name is Shukri Sultan. I'm a writer and educator between London and Montreal. Today I'm joined by Tomiwa Folorunso, a Nigerian Scottish writer, editor, and creative producer based between Brussels and Edinburgh. Thank you for joining us, Tomiwa. So you're someone who works in many different formats. You're a writer and a writer, editor, filmmaker. So first, I think it'd be really nice if you could introduce yourself to the audience and all the different formats that you work in.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Tomiwa Folorunso, and yeah, I'm a writer, editor, creative producer, and filmmaker. So I think it's always tricky trying to piece these different parts together. But I started off as a writer in my early 20s after graduating uni, and that I suppose not quickly, but naturally led to my work as an editor. Then in terms of creative production, I use that to kind of talk about as the title for any programming or curating I do as well. And that could be in terms of events or with film festivals. And then as a filmmaker, that's something that is very new to me. I just produced a short film a month ago. We screened it for the first time last month in October. So yeah, I think these are all perhaps different roles or job titles or parts of my career, but they all have the same kind of theme running through them. And I'm always, it's just different ways of storytelling, right? It's different ways of sharing stories, sharing ideas, bringing communities and audiences together. So there's a theme, there's a method to the chaos.
Thank you. And I guess what I find most interesting about your background is that you originally studied history at university. Yeah. So you just said that you started off after uni working as a writer, but I wanted to know a bit more about how your background in history has kind of shaped your work today.
Ooh, I think, okay, so first, full disclosure, when I was in my last years of secondary school and I was thinking about university, I wanted to apply for drama school, and because I wanted to be an actor. And my dad said to me, who works in the kind of creative cultural sector, he said, go to university first, get a degree, join the drama society, and then afterwards, then go to drama school. So I was like, okay, because that's what a lot of people do as well. It's not the only way, but it was what a lot of people do, because they say at 18 you're too young for drama school, so go get some experience and then go back and do it that way. So I originally applied and started university studying psychology. I then, at the end of first semester, had a meltdown, I would say, and a bit of a freak out, and was like, I hate this, I can't do it, I don't want to be here. And both my parents kind of just said, maybe don't drop out. Is there anything else you like or you're interested in or that you would want to do? I'd always been good at history in school. I had taken some of my outside courses were in history during my first year, so I switched to history. So history was never a course that I would have applied for. It never occurred to me to apply for it because I was probably never going to work in the expected industries with that kind of degree. I think the way it shaped my writing, I suppose. I like to think that with my writing, I perhaps can have a longer, can view things in a wider frame in terms of time, in terms of seeing patterns of history, perhaps, and of historical events. And I think in terms of, also, I suppose, I do write a lot of personal or opinion, but I also really like fact. And I think there's a huge place for and importance in fact, and to not confuse the two, and for them to exist simultaneously, like in work. So I think, yeah, those, and in terms of just writing, I mean, I just wrote, and that's what you do in a history degree, you read and you write. So yeah, I think that's how it's shaped my writing, or the writing part of my career. But it's funny because I don't know about you, but like, I don't remember a lot of the stuff I studied. I remember the other day I did a whole course on like Stalin's Russia. Cannot tell you a thing. So yeah,
It was very traditional history course. That's what you can remember from it.
Yeah, it was very traditional. I was at Edinburgh. It was very traditional. It was very, I don't think anybody there actually really wanted to work, like, was that in love with the subject or wanted a career that they needed a history degree for. It's very much a course, or my experience of it is very much a course similar to something like English literature, where it's like people just come along and need to get a good degree from a good university, and they were good at history at school, so they did history. That was my experience of it. I'm not saying that's necessarily true everywhere, but yeah. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry. I guess with, because I also have a background in history and architectural history. And so when I look at your, I always view history as like another form of narrative and stories. Mm-hmm. So I see that kind of really strong narrative within your work that I assume is also kind of enriched by your training as a historian.
Yeah, I suppose so. And that's nice that you see that. Thank you. I think actually, like, I suppose one thing that is important to me, and maybe this is why I was drawn to history, or something that, you just soak in as you study something for 4 years, is that so much of history, or what we read in the academic environment, is dominated by white Western historians. And so I suppose how that feeds into my other work now is that it's like, what's the other story we're not telling? Who are the other people we're not hearing from? Why aren't they there? And how can we make them there? And I think, or how can we make sure they are recorded and they are archived as part of this world that we're living in, so that in 50 years' time, when somebody looks back, the evidence is there. I think it's a lot easier now in the world we live in to create that kind of digital paper trail of experiences, in a sense. And so making sure that if it's what I write, or if it's the film we're producing, or even when Natasha, my collaborator Natasha, and I programmed for Glasgow Film Festival, it was really important that there's writing around things that can live on, so that people can access it. So it's also about, I suppose, creating an archive or adding to the archive.
I really like creating an archive of the present, but also within your film you're kind of recreating an archive of the past. So please kind of tell us a bit more about the film.
So Maud is it's a 15-minute short film. It was co-produced with Rababa, which are a gallery and studio based in Edinburgh in Scotland, and it is about the Scottish Ghanaian artist called Maud Salter. So she died in 2008 when she was 48 years old. She died of cancer, and she had an incredible outpouring of artistry. So she was like a filmmaker, a poet, a photographer, an editor, a writer, a collager. There's probably more. She did so much. And we different a lot of her work has not necessarily been given the recognition that we feel it deserves. She spoke a lot in her work, and all of her work centered around Black women's creativity, and she did not shy away from that. She very much called out a lot of things that I think people today are still scared to call out, that she saw in the arts world and that she saw in the situation or the experience of Black women in the UK, in Britain. And so 2 years ago, Natasha, Rowena and I were co-programming for Glasgow Film Festival, and we programmed a series of films, and the theme was Welcome To. One of the films we screened was called The X in Scotland, and it was a short film made in 1992 that was about Black and Asian youths in Scotland talking about their experience and understanding and relationship with Malcolm X. And we screened that film, and it's a really great film. Yeah, it's really important, I think, and it's really interesting to understand the feeling of those communities at the time. But what we struggled with when we were programming was we couldn't find the films that we wanted to program. And I say that in the sense that we really struggled to find Black films by Black Scottish filmmakers, or films that really spoke to the Black Scottish experience. And so we had all these feelings, and then we knew about Maud, and just somewhere, you know, the kind of idea comes to, oh, why don't we make a film about Maud Salter? Why don't we? And that was definitely, I know for me, was about archiving her. It was about making sure that people knew she existed, but also that this, I suppose, this archiving process was done by the people her work speaks to the most. That being Black women, Black Scottish people, Black Scottish artists, or Black artists working in Scotland, like whatever, but it was done by us. And that was our, I suppose, I don't want to say like, not commitment, offering, or like to Maud, but also to say, yeah, this exists. So yeah, that's how that came to be.
I think that's really beautiful, that phrase, by us, but so you yourself are I think that's quite beautiful. I'm talking about like a limited voice of Black voices within filmmaking. I think I haven't looked at the recent, but like up until like 2019, there had only been 6 Black British female directors who have showcased their film in a cinema. So this lack of representation, particularly within the film industry in Britain, is quite alarming, and quite hopefully things will change. And it's great to see your work. And I hope more films in the future.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the stats we found as well when we first were programming, and it is so. Yeah, so much just needs to change, and I think now sitting as a programmer as well, you realise how difficult that change is. And I think we've just seen in Edinburgh, the Edinburgh International Film Festival has shut down. This year was its last year, like especially speaking in a Scottish context, because it's what I know, I suppose I know the best, is that the industry is really going to struggle. And if the industry can't even stay afloat and can't even give platforms, or continue to give to the platform, to the voices they've always given the space for, then for anybody else it's just gotten 10 times harder again.
In the film, like what like what precedent, like what other filmmakers, what works, not just film, but also as like a writer, like whose work your inspiration from?
I think, this is always like a tricky question. I think as a writer, I was like, I was very heavily influenced by, or when I first began to write and my style of writing, I was really heavily influenced by like Galden and Black Ballad in terms of platforms. And that was more so in the sense of not being afraid to say what you have to say and to share your opinion and your experience, and to be really unapologetic in that. I think those two, I wonder if they, especially Galden, because that was when I was in my third or last year of university, I think if that hadn't existed, I would really wonder where is my space or my voice as a writer or like a journalist. So they were definitely very influential, and I think I wrote something for them maybe like a year and a half ago now, and Charlie Cuff was the editor, and even just that process of working with her taught me so much, again, as a writer and a journalist. And the same with Toby from Black Ballads as well. Like both those, and Toby's been so supportive. And then seeing the work they've done is also really inspirational. I think in terms of like my work, I read a lot of fiction. And so I'm really into developing my own writing style and how like fiction and opinion and poetry perhaps can come together, and that is something that's constantly evolving. I'm definitely not even there yet, but so I think for me it's reading a lot of fiction, and I also find reading a lot of Nigerian writers or authors. I just feel, I don't know if it's because I'm Nigerian or whatever, but I just feel so at home in that writing style, and that is really inspirational as well.
Are you reading those writers in the English language or
in the English language? Which is but I think, so I don't speak Yoruba, but I can understand a little bit. And whenever I speak, this is just a complete tangent, but whenever I ask my mum or my dad, like, like, what is this word in Yoruba, or how do you say that in Yoruba, which is the language they speak, there's hundreds in Nigeria, they can never directly translate it to English, right? The language is so full and so beautiful and so expressive that what is one word in English is like 5 words in Yoruba. And so I think even though I'm reading these writers in the English language, I think there's something really beautiful about these writers are all going to be at least bilingual. And so their approach to the English language, I find, is just really rich and really expressive. Because the moment you speak 2 languages, I'm learning French right now, the moment you speak 2 languages, how you express yourself and like understand the world just becomes, I think it becomes really rich. I think it's really beautiful.
I'm also quite a fan of literature within the diaspora. So people from like Vietnam, those different kind of writers. I really love reading about their experiences and like being of like heritage. That also really inspired, like that also quite influenced my writing as well. But regarding kind of language and things not quite being translated, a lot of your work kind of discusses the lives of Black women, whether it be more in the film or other Black Scottish artists, the BBC radio episode that you produced, or even your own life in the essay, Dear Lexi. So my question is, during that process, do you encounter any like difficulties in conveying like the nuances of these different kind of lived experiences, especially when you're kind of when you're producing it for kind of a wide audience like the BBC?
Oh, that is a very good question. That is, so I made the BBC Radio 4 documentary was in 2020, and it was Radio 4 has this like series that's probably been around for years and years and years called The Art of Now. And so the one I presented and researched was about Black female creatives in Scotland. The essay or the radio programme came about because of an article I'd been commissioned to write earlier in the year by Black Ballad with the same title. And so I think when I interviewed the artists and wrote for Black Ballad, there's a level of safety you have, because Black Ballad is also protected by a paywall. So you know that anybody there who reads it has paid to read it and is also supportive of Black Ballad's mission, which is to like champion and support Black women in Britain's experiences. To then go to the BBC Radio 4 documentary, which was a really interesting process and a really great journey, and I had a great producer, Sam, who was just so on it and just let me kind of do what I want and just press record. I think I interviewed 7 people. We only ended up using 6. All of those interviews were minimum an hour, and it then gets edited down into a half an hour radio piece. A lot of stuff had to be cut for practicalities. A lot of it because it doesn't make sense with the story, or you know what you want to say in this half an hour, but also because this is going out on a national or like a radio station that's available to access worldwide. We are talking about Black women's experiences in Scotland. People can be racist and misogynistic, and I just felt a real responsibility that as a presenter, you, even if it's true, even if it means leaving out part of your story, this is not the platform for it, because it might not be safe. And I think that can be so frustrating, because to really get into the nuances of our experiences, you want to be as honest as possible, but you can't always be that honest because of the reception. And I used to make videos with a platform called BBC The Social, and I would speak about being Black and Scottish, and so I've been the victim, I suppose, of like racist, misogynistic abuse online. It's horrible. I'm not going to put anybody in a position where they face that. So I think in that sense, that makes it that was a challenge. We made a good documentary. I don't think it was the best documentary, but it was the best we could make in that kind of, that circumstance. When it comes to my own work, it's really difficult, and like right now I'm just in a period of where like I'm like, I don't know, because there was a time I used to share a lot, and I used to like, you could basically find out anything about me on the internet because I've written about it. And now I think as you get older, right, you don't want to share as much, but it's like, how do you find balance and share your experience but also protect yourself, because it feels a little bit more scary now.
Was that, when you say that you have lots and like loads of stuff written online, was that the Tumblr blog day, or was it articles?
That was like a WordPress blog. That was like, bought my own domain. I was like sitting on the 3rd floor of the library, not writing any of the essays I should have been writing, and instead like telling people about like what contraception I was on. Like, I have no shame about that, and I like, love it. Like, I think, to be honest, there was probably something, especially at that time, because we're talking like 2016, 2017, which doesn't sound like a long time, but it was. Things have changed so much. To see, like, to be able to read a blog post from a Black Scottish woman talking about contraception is pretty cool. It was not, nobody else was doing it. So, yeah, but just doesn't need to be done now for me.
I understand. I had I think the parcel was very, including the parcel you're writing, just it kind of enriches and much more kind of rigorous, and much more kind of enjoyable to read. So it's great that you do share so much with your audience. But I was wondering, can you mention any names of any writers who write in a similar way, or that you, or write in a particular style that you really like?
Ooh, okay, I've got like all my books behind me. Right. Caleb Nelson's Open Water. That was like, I read that this year because I'd just been putting it off, I don't know why. And I read it, and then I read maybe the first 3 pages, and then I had to shut it because I got really overwhelmed, because I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to read a book that is this good ever again. I need to savor it. I think his just writing style, the beauty and the fluidity to his writing is just, I'm just like, what is your head like? Like, how does someone even write a 10th as good as that? What else? Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo was the first fiction book that I'd read that made me feel like I could write a fiction book, in the sense that the style in which she writes I really liked, and the way that she played with that she plays a bit with like punctuation and grammar in that book, and the story and those kind of like short stories. I really enjoyed that. What else? And we've not got long. Ghana Must Go by Tai Selassie is another really beautiful book, and it's one that it's how you can, I think what I'm drawn to is writers that can bring you into this world, bring you into this character, and you've never experienced what this character is experiencing, but you feel it. Like, you feel those feelings. Like, if a writer can do that, then I'm in. I'm sold. Like, that is it for me. Those are 3. Another one. I'll do one more. Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola. That is, yeah, again, just beautiful. She just writes so richly. So yeah. So as you can tell, all fiction. Like, I'm just,
But
I just love it.
In fact, you've got a Carla named, like, very, very factual, very like well researched, but it's also very personal.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually so true. Yeah, I've only read half of it. I've not finished it yet. But yeah, and also even things like Audrey Lorde, Your Silence Will Not Protect You, Bell Hooks, All About Love. As you can tell, I'm trying to work my way through like the classics, I feel. But yeah, the mixing of fact and personal, but also written in a way that is a good story, or is good writing. That's what, like, as a writer, that's what I'm striving for. But we'll see.